Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to ask you a favor. So I have a personal need to videotape this lecture. So I purchased a small camcorder. It's actually cute, but I'm not well skilled about camera or technical devices, so I've learned much yesterday from my research assistant. And as I've said, you will be now available about the videotape lecture. Two other classes will be in system as a matter of a cyber lecture, and it's kind of a school polish, or the professor may encourage to launch. However, of course, we can say there are pros and cons about the context of learning. Face-to-face contact may be superior and more effective in terms of educational efficiency. However, in other aspects, they would address the need of math in some dimension, and also could drive the students to be focused on that lecture, not desultory about the maths of the class people. So I now practice on half basis about the lecture. Okay. In this class, we will continue on two and second and third themes. What are those? I regret the scene would not be clear, so your vision would trouble. I would color a font in a computer distracted. I use the black letters. As advised, you would retrieve the course material, printouts, which in coverage of this class discussion. So you can complement your understanding, which will not be precise in some sense, in some ambit, and any other. So I do not like to obfuscate this class progress. However, some many chores and actually corrective needs are failed. So I'll redeem the kind of fallacies or concern. So you are now on second theme, a broad reach of administrative action and power. Actually, the active state, the paradigm of welfare state, which is provisional and address the needs of people, the direction is not conservative, dominantly. So the government are responsible in high extent and gravitate on in response with the public needs. And so increasing needs about welfare system, for example, and pension plan, economic justice are all the issues the government has to be responsible for. And also, we consider the scope of constitutional powers are fairly in continuum and over an extent of play that the bureaucrats, unions, and public agencies could well find the sources of sources of authority, and that it granted in limited provisions, actually within the constitutional document. However, as you imagine, there are vagueness, ambiguities, and in some cases, encroachments among three branches could well be envisaged and may be defined as virtue in some cases, since the Constitution is actually basic and principled. So many spaces are left in blanket or amenable to discretion of each responsible organs, and also as one of a playground that we have to report ultimately to the goal of nations. So you can see the high chances and much probabilities that the executive branch could reach in very strong ways, and also much leeway to exercise the executive power. So you can see the same. Let's begin our story with Christmas Carol. Charles Dickens, you know the name, famous. But he told his readers they must act. The Mary was there as a domain. In order to appreciate his story, you must believe in the tremendous reach and power of bureaucratic government in order to appreciate the importance of the study of domestic law. I introduced the imagery of about unresponsive, unfashionable bureaucrat, some deprivation or abandonment from Kafka's novel or cinema story. So bureaucratic government has great potential to act. However, the reality has long been retracted in our understanding, so that could be transformed, and in some cases alarmed about crisis of society, for example, national crisis, and the kind of tension to alterate the embedded legend. So it's actually challenges and crisis of nation. You can see the New Deal context as I argued in the last class. So let's go on. Here are just few bits of data. The document, the 20th century domestic explosion. You now know the name of Federal Register. Is a official gazette or the kind of a collection of admissible rule makings, decrees, orders, and its utility is very noticeable about due process concept and transparency. They publish the rules made by public agencies. So the concept of consistency and also system could be practiced. by relying on the rule-making power of a government. So it prevents arbitrary disposition or dealings about polish addresses. So the ultimatum could go to each individual citizen. For example, do you have can you claim the pension right, social benefit, entitlement, legitimately about the Constitution, a public statute, and in our guidelines, a standard. So rules made by agencies include the kind of a standard that they implement the public policy. So they create and implement the public policy. They made rule to address equity and equal treatment of a citizen and others. The ideal, espoused by Constitution, equal protection of laws should be respected in the sphere of the public administration, not only against Congress, but also the executive. The constitutional mandate about equity should be kept meaningful of all the responsibilities of the federal government. The federal bureaucracy now issues approximately 7,000 rules and policy statements a year, 2,000 of which legally bind the citizen. By law, agencies must publish these actions in the Federal Register. The Federal Register, which was created in 1935, occupies more library shelf space than all the laws passed by Congress since it first met in 1789. In just the first 4 months of 2008, 24,850 pages were published in the Federal Register. So this increase about the administrative rules simply indicates the greatest reach of a public administration in the 20th century. As introduced, we also its highest pinnacle in 1970s. So the 10 years during in 1970s could well be said about the losing of a rulemaking. So very typical in the terms, and context could be influenced about the propensity of two parties, Republican and a liberal democracy. So what are other aspects we need to consider about active government? Annually, the Social Security Administration alone processes 9 million applications for Social Security benefits. Most of these raise no legal problems, yet the small fraction that does is 20 times greater in number than all of the civil and criminal lawsuits heard in the regular federal court each year, with the exception of bankruptcy cases. So once we encountered kind of a sigh and a deep breath about the accumulated number of case laws commented in the world by Ross Capone, Dean Ross Capone. He said, now we are pressed by pack of case laws, tremendous amount of case laws, how do we marshal them in any meaningful order? So can we progress on or restatement or the kind of compact codes which includes principles and provisions in their terms with the code as law. They see the common law, case laws as law. So the comment of Roscoe implies the convergence of two major legal traditions. We may exchange legal cultures, and he's one of close friend with a Kerrigan, who is a German legal philosopher, and their effort actually very operating to institute the United Nations. Their ideas about legal positivism and the kind of a Grundlagen concept all tender some philosophical basis of law in organizing a new world government. Of course, that should be eclectic, since now we often consider the international community in realistic perspective. So the politics would largely prevail. Often the second status of nations is commented by our minister, foreign minister. What is his name? He told us that the internationally law is tool for second tier of nations. It's actually the major powers, typically militaristic, Russia and China, United States, and France, Great Britain, to 5 standing members of a Security Council. You probably learned that the United Nations is operating centered at a Security Council rather than General Assembly. The tendency might be transformed on a steady basis. So some democratic ethos, or how do you consider the justice in the United Nations? Can you agree the equal vote between smallest state, for example, in desolate Pacific Ocean? Imagine your small country. And same China or United States. Is it justice? So might be not in rationale. Often do not appear for reason. So some anomaly and the kind of a gut failure could well explicate our situation in this globe. Typically, if we consider political, international politics, so we get astray from our main point. And what are other context, the modern context of a domestic state could be identified. So there are now approximately 646 federal trial judges in the U.S., but there are over 1,400 federal administrative law judges, 79% of whom work for the Social Security Administration. So you now have an idea about some gross extent of disparity between civil or criminal matters and administrative matters. You will not be imprecise if you embrace the dichotomy in response with a traditional division. Civil, criminal should be conservative and often functioned to be seen within the constitutional ambit of conservative. Sanctity of property right, freedom contract, due limitation on civil liability, and the kind of concept, the science, which requires close examination of mental state about criminal culpability. The kind of idea is conservative and very classic to be preserved until the contemporary times. Nowadays, we see the increasing profile of a federal administrative law code. Of the 153.8 million Americans in the civilian labor force, about 2.7 million work for the federal government and over 19.2 million for state and local governments. So what? The resources and apparatus are in a larger ambit and actually practiced, you see, in the context in comparison. The judiciary is small branch. Congress, United States Congress is so small. How broad is the reach of regulatory government? Consider these typical news stories, all from the New York Times. See, March 30th, 2006, the Transportation Department announced new fuel economy standards for sport utility vehicles, pickup trucks, and minivans that will make some of them go farther on a gallon of gasoline than the average car does, and apply to many of the biggest SUVs for the first time. And what is the news story published April 20th, 2006? The Food and Drug Administration announced, contradicting a 1999 review by a panel of highly regarded scientists, that no scientific studies supported the medical use of marijuana. So the science can be resonant with a public a good or value that the executive branch often emphasize. You see, so it is a twin as coupled to address the modern national needs. You see, so it provides a background often and support the policy, public policy shaped by executive, and the branches could be created in response with scientific transformation or new discoveries, or how is the Food and Drug Administration. You see later the role of EPA, which has increased over decades. How about environmental preservation, protection? The issues will now be dealt in many contexts. You see, for example, WTO also incorporates the idea and the standards now raised by environmentalists. So line to compromise between developmentalist and environmentalist is one lens we can investigate the Paris. And also you see in the newspaper story, March 20th, the Federal Communication Commission unanimously approved the rule banning exclusive telephone service agreements between apartment building owners and carriers giving tenants their pick-up providers. So you know now come across the names in responsibilities and in charge of important public programs, Federal Communications Commission, APA, Environmental Protection Agency, and so on. And in this World Wide Web times, internet communication, the Federal Communications Commission now expected to address the scope of challenges. You see, for the US case, they would exploit this workforce in response with a national security example, and also are required to procure a favorable business environment about this competitive industries, internet and others. Apple, how do you see? And also, how do you consider Facebook? The legal dispute about the patent rights between Samsung and Apple have long been minded by Koreans. So, the New York Times reported June 10, 1998, that the Department of Health and Human Services announced its intention to change the law to determine which of the tens of thousands of patients who require an organ transplant to stay alive will get the first chance at available organs. The Food and Drug Administration authorized the first full testing of an HIV vaccine. The Federal Trade Commission filed an antitrust suit against the Intel Corporation for allegedly trying to cause the computer manufacturers to drop their disputes about patent rights against Intel. So many. You see, actually, you may hear of a National Science Foundation. It is one of important federal agencies to boost the college and university research, and they like to maintain and competitiveness and exploit updated knowledge to promote the national economy. And the context could be intertwined with other branches or departments. For example, what is a Food and Drug Administration? They collaborate with a research team of universities about public health and others, and they may condemn some drugs or others for public health reasons. They rule on a permission and a license of many regulatory ambit scope, and so highly responsible for the area of concerns. And also, their role is entwined with economic goals of nation. So they shape a strategy to address the international trade. In some cases, they advocate ratification of FTA between South Korea and United States. How do you consider the controversy and some group protests from Korean medical doctors? They, of course, manage a professional association to address the interest. And actually, how would you see the FTA could operate about service industries? It's, public health industry and one area of concern to be monitored by United States, obviously. And we legal professionals also now faced with the requirement of FTA. We have to liberalize the legal service market in terms of qualification and the types of service possibly provided by foreign lawyers. If the statutory response about foreign consular has been prepared, so we now have a system and institution to collaborate. The scope of a competence was spelled in the document, statute, or the decree. So in the printout, I hopefully expect that you can read some of important figures depicting the ranks and division of responsibilities about the main federal government agencies. For example, you can see the figure about the Federal Trade Commission. The responsibility is in line authority, where chairman is being in principal charge, and command and order will be in assistant. So there will be chief of staff and office of executive director and regions. A commissioner may start to support the role of chairman. They are responsible chairman in ultimate terms of a organ. And you see on page 13, Department of Labor. We have Office of Secretary of Labor and also Office of the Deputy Secretary of Labor. And they schedule in advance, and we utilize an executive secretariat, Office of Public Affairs and Assistant Secretary. So does this see as a bureaucratic maze? So in some concerns, the organizational theorists may consider the trait and characteristic of a United States bureaucracy, a kind of bureaucratic maze. They are the dormant, a smack of professionalism might be demanded. What do you see? In any case, the responsibility is serious in terms of modern administrative state. You see the Environmental Protection Agency, and in the last protection, you open to the Department of Homeland Security. And this department is actually in the center of a recent national response. So other departments and many crucial organs within the federal government have to collaborate, cooperate, and in collective wisdom respond with a terrorism or a national emergency. FBI, Department of Agriculture and Treasury. All the types, we have three classes of federal administrative agencies. The first one is an independent regulatory commissions. The second form would be agencies housed within a cabinet level department. And third, agencies outside of the formal structure of cabinet department. Then, how do you consider if this ambition would not be connection? Do you consider it provide a utopian cure about our social pathologies? For example, consider the polarization about the economic perspective. How do you see the private class? We have been long said about the rate of suicide within our neighborhood. Poverty class could well be made distinct from economic injustice. It actually a problem of a basic and human basics, kind of a survival. The third and final state setting theme discussed in this chapter explores and begins to explain what every reader already knows. So I now base this lecture on Professor Harrington, who now works as a professor in New York University. It's the Department of Political Science. And his textbook is very enlightening and much used for public policy students and law students even. He illustrates major administrative cases and provides a helpful comment about, in terms of law and public policy. So human beings run the government, and human beings everywhere sometimes screw up. Regulatory government has not satisfactorily resolved all the problems created by modern, highly technological economies. Worse, some reasonably successful solutions have simultaneously created other problems of their own. For example, the social security system has successfully created a support system for millions of retired, disabled, and otherwise disadvantaged citizens. Yet the system lends itself to abuse by citizens who present false claims and by administrators who may arbitrarily withhold benefits recipients are entitled to. So we may be timid about this complicacy. The social welfare officer may be amazed at some unexpected deaths. Who would be dead, actually. And also there will be agony now in policymakers, for example. How about the economists in what they call this? They have long foretold that the sources, funds of a welfare benefit would become depleted in near times. So we now also cast some injustices among types of a different pension plan, national pension plan. So actually, myriad of issues are now entangled that should be resolved. That is a greatest dilemma that the welfare state, the administrative state now be challenging. Some shortcomings in regulatory government will never disappear. Probably the most obvious of these results from inevitable economic change. An administrative program structured and constrained by legislative mandates and its own goals and procedures does not automatically adjust to technological advances and changes in competition. The regulation of transportation began with railroads. Began when railroads had a near monopoly on long distance carrying of people and cargo. So the regulation industry, railroad industry in the United States, typically provides good example, which have many aspects of implications in understanding economic history of the United States. One author to turn on this issue had been a novelist. That context of contribution was accepted by Nobel Committee, and he was awarded a Nobel Prize in economics. Many of the practices of transport regulation were carried over into the trucking and airline markets and remained there long after economists and business people realized that trucks, buses, trains, and airlines had created a much more competitive and self-regulating market than a regulatory policy admitted. Under President Carter in the late 1970s, deregulation of transportation began. So, this phrase now coming a repercussion from the comment of Lady President Park. So, deregulation is actually a theme of our nation. So, that is threshold to motivate foreign investment in one sense, and of course domestic economy of Republic of Korea should be recast in the context of how to boost the demand and how to procure a favorable environment for the investors and business people. So That is also the concept now WTO authority has relied on. So we now will discuss the dilemmas of a goal attainment. So actually that is not an each case. Another as subtler in its capable shortcoming is the elusiveness of organizational goals. It may help to project a mental picture of the objective of administration, but it is essential to understand that goals are more often than not the innocent looking tip of very extensive iceberg. So the goal chart is just a chart. We are public officers. Actually, in verbatim, we may dream about unachievable ideas. So it may be reduced into some figures. Or it's actually grand and very attractive. However, could we get practical to get through all the goals? It must be practical in preparation. That is one point of learning that the organizational theorists encourage. Americans with their can-do pragmatism are tempted to expect government simply to figure out what needs to and do it. In this view, administration, either public or private, amounts to formulating goals, choosing the means that will achieve the goals, and then getting on with the job. But several harsh realities make that approach a negative. The first harsh reality we may call the level of good information problem. The level of goal information problem. Promoting any good, the cleanliness of air, fair wages, and healthy working conditions, the nutritional value of a grainer, television programming that informs and entertains without corrupting, can constitute an administrative goal. Imagine if you now working in units or branches of government, then you would delve into some specialized area and may refer to laws, constitutions, and the ways of dealing developed by your senior officers, and you are encouraged to report to line authority. So you may prepare a plan and express in high vision the goals. For example, healthy working conditions, the nutritional value of a grain. So, can the prevention of evils, blocking monopolistic mergers, deterring consumer fraud, minimizing traffic fatalities, and so forth. The traffic problem is very serious. We often do not feel in this mid-sized city. However, how about Seoul? It's actually exacerbates a fair extent of a civic lives, traffic fatalities. Conceived this way, administrative policy goals are too numerous to count. Virtually every state creating a federal or state administrative body sets forth, usually in flowery and imprecise language, the agency's mission. So I like to advise to visit some websites of public agency. For example, you may refer to the Ministry Department in Republic of Korea. You may even reach the EPA webpage. They at first glance presents goals of organization, mission statement. It's splendid enough, but very simple since it should be. So it should not travel with the sense and intelligence about the public officer and also the clients. We touch with the client. So actually, we can notice in scope and in dimension the dilemmas of goal attainment embedded in bureaucratic practices. And also, we illustrate bureaucratic pathologies as one of major reasons about failure of government. So we now start here, and I like to progress about setting the stage for the study of administrative. And some stories I mentioned. Okay, thank you for your attention. Any questions? Okay, fine. And can you write down your name and student number? I have an upload question.